Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks, wherever the heck in the world you are. It's V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live on this edition of The Great Game with Matthew Ehret. Matt's brought on a good buddy of his, a great individual himself. He's the one and only Tim Kirby. He is an independent journalist, a TV and radio host. He is also known as the American living in Russia. He's a fellow right from Ohio in Cleveland, and Tim's going to be joining us today. They're going to be breaking down all things geostrategic, geoeconomic, and all the nonsense that's out there in the mainstream media that distorts the views that we Americans have in terms of what's really going on in the world. So Matthew and Tim, welcome, guys. How are you?
I'm doing good, getting over being sick, but other than that, I'm happy to be here. I'm the promo music was a little Van Halen remix,
Yeah.
David Lee Roth era. So I'm pumped, guys. All right, David Lee Roth.
Good.
Yeah.
That's our testosterone injection tune right there.
I like that.
So Matt, Tim, where do you guys want to begin? I mean, Tim, why don't you tell us, because you're the new guy here on Rogue.
All right.
I'd love for you to give a little background on who you are and how you wound up in Russia of all places, and and your website and all the other things that you do, man. Go ahead.
Well, first about what I'm doing, it's kind of an eclectic mix. Maybe that suits my personality. So, on the one hand, I do a pretty big tourism video project. It is called Russia Tips, Tricks, and Travel. That is for a little group called Russia Beyond, which is a division of Russia Today, also known as RT. So that's something very official, but apolitical. That is purely going around Russia, showing what's there. That's what's on the screen. It'd be
Nice.
thrilling if some of you would happen to subscribe to it if you like it. Besides travel, we also have, there's a little series about how I built or restored a house in Russia. To be honest, I actually kind of like doing that one a little bit more, even though the quality is a lot lower, because I film that usually without anyone else, just sort of by myself. But yeah, so that's kind of life in Russia, traveling around Russia from the experience of someone who's been here forever. I've been here since 2006. So yeah, that's kind of the way it looks like. We also have a lot of videos about food because I like food travel videos, so we do them.
Why not?
Now, for the other side of things is the sort of the exact opposite. I do a lot of serious political material and have for a long time. A lot of writing about geopolitics, media influence, ideology. Ideology is probably actually my favorite topic of all. And I do that for the Strategic Culture Foundation. And there's also here this one, right? So you don't have to change your tab. Oh, here, okay, Strategic Culture, we have it. Or here, okay. This Tim Kirby Russia is a new YouTube project I have. The Strategic Culture Foundation, if you take a look, I've been writing for them for quite some time. We also do a podcast for them, which you can see if you click on the podcast tab with my buddy Joaquin Flores. It is called the Strategy Session, and it's kind of focused on some of the articles that they have on their site, but not entirely. So some people might really enjoy that. So we have some tourism as stuff, the sort of lighter side of life. We have this geopolitics, ideology, predicting the future, the serious stuff. And I wore my uniform because I also play pro-American football here. I got to live the dream in Russia because they really, really needed some reserve players. So I actually I play for the team that's won the last two. Russia has two seasons. There's a spring and a fall season. So it's hard to say that there's sort of two Super Bowls a year, but we've won the last two. But obviously, I'm old. As you can see, there's a lot of gray hair here. I'm beat up. So I'm not like a starter. I'm not out there at 40 years old just cracking guys. I'm not trying to say that I'm a superhero, but I am living the dream because it is the big league. It's the big, toughest guys, and I can sort of hack it, at least for now. But I'm a reserve player, and we have a sort of full team and then a development team. And I'm on a development team, although there's nothing to develop at my age. So there you go. So I'm sort of number 4 tight end. I don't play that much, but it's fun. So
Tim, we're about the same age. I'm 42, and I tell you, most guys our age right now, we're relegated to the keyboard lift and the mouse press in terms of exercise.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing, man. I've had some I don't really want to get into it. A couple personal issues come up, and I sort of needed to do something physical. When this whole COVID thing started, I really began to spend a lot of time at the house I bought. So I did this one project, and I was able to sort of organize my money where I had 1,000,000 rubles, which is like $15,000. And anyone who lives in Russia knows that leaving money in the bank is ineffective. It's a bad strategy. You'll just burn through it. So I kind of had a little bit over $1 million and closer to $1.5 million at one point. And I was like, okay, gotta do something with this. There's no way to buy an apartment in the city. And I was like, well, the real dream is to not live in the city. So I bought a really, really beat up old dacha house near a little city called Chekhov, which is sort of like the equivalent. If any of you know where Poughkeepsie is around New York.
Of course. I used to live right near there.
Really?
Yeah, I'm from Orange County, right across the river.
No kidding. Okay, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I sort of bought a place in Russia's Poughkeepsie near the big city, and I don't regret it. But as I was saying, over time, I started to fix this up myself mostly. Then I kind of found some guys to help me. But I started spending more and more time outdoors, and all of a sudden I was like, man, this feels right. This feels good.
Yeah.
And so after that, I kind of wanted to take it to the next level. And an American acquaintance of mine asked me to go to an open tryout for American football. And I thought that maybe, I didn't think, I was like, well, this is probably not going to go good. I'll tell you what, I don't know why they picked me, because after that tryout, we did the warm-up exercises, right? And after the warm-up, I was already floored. I was floored from stretching. However, somehow they put me in the 20 guys that they wanted to sort of boil down. And I eventually made the cut. But again, to not overplay and create some sort of mythic legend, a lot of the guys just sort of gave up. It was more a war of attrition rather than talent. So there you go. And I feel a lot better about life, about myself, about everything. We have 4 men here. For any of you men watching, try spending time outdoors. I think it's very important for our male psyche. It's a blessing. So.
Absolutely, 100%. There's something powerful about reconnecting with nature. There's something very primordial and primal about that brings out the best in men. And it's a known thing. The more time men spend outside, I mean, you want to raise your testosterone levels. Spend some time outside. Get close to nature, feel the earth.
The woman's realm is sort of this more internal world, not just the internal world of if someone would be, go in the kitchen. No, but the internal world of the home, the family, very much the feminine spirit is sort of this looking inward, and the male spirit is sort of not being at home, going out, go out into the wilderness, go get something, go do something, go build something. So I think it's reconnecting with this masculine outward sort of philosophy, which I sort of always knew that, but until COVID sort of forced it for me to have nothing to do but besides drill 2x4s to hang up framework for insulation. All of a sudden you're like, man, this is awesome. So
yeah, absolutely. Matt, what's up, buddy? How are you? What do you got to contribute to this? I want to begin. There's a lot to talk about. So I guess, Matt, you want to lead this?
Well, I to a degree, sure, why not? I just really wanted to introduce everybody here. I had a feeling, you, V, CJ, Tim, myself, we all sort of come from the pre-internet childhood generation where we grew up with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, He-Man, and we would still play outside. We weren't necessarily raised by the internet or Netflix, so I thought that we might have some similar, at least, experiences in some ways. And because Tim has walked both sides of the world, East and West, has actually immersed himself in the Russian culture and has some astute geopolitical insights as well as cultural insights, I thought he would make just a really good introduction to the Rogue News discussion process. As far as me, I was very influenced by Tim had recently written a piece on strategic culture. I think it was called "The Real Reason the Right Continues to Lose Every Ideological Battle," which struck me.
I didn't think they would.
Really? That's pretty funny, Tim, because this morning, that's like exactly what CJ and I were talking about. It's like it's the right is all about losing graciously.
Yeah. Because I was just surprised because I've had an extremely wide editorial freedom there, and I thought that this one might go over the line. So that's great. They actually published that. And although it's a little rough, this is a rough read, guys. When you're writing about politics and when you're someone like me, who I'm sure all of you consume a lot of YouTube, and I watch a lot of different things. In fact, I watch a lot of stuff I don't agree with because I find it more interesting. Even sometimes sermons from religions I don't believe in. But the thing is that with this, I keep seeing the people who are, again, I don't even want to say the right. It's this broad consensus of people sort of from the West who like the West. Generally, that's the right, but not necessarily. So I try to express that in the article.
Yeah.
But take, for example, the whole red pill thing. That's really popular on YouTube. YouTube has been a little bit more friendly to the red pill than it has been to people on the political right. But they just cannot see that really one of the key barriers or the key causes of all the problems that we're having in the West is when we consider the individual to be sacred, we all sort of become narcissistic and hedonistic, and we don't care about anyone else. And that's really where it comes from.
Right.
It's this constant where they're finger pointing. That's bad. That's bad. Don't do it. Don't do it, without giving reasons. And that's really what the article sort of gets into.
Yeah, and what I really appreciated is just this lack of, as you pointed out, the lack of polemic, the lack of appreciation of the sophistication of the nature of the crisis at hand right now, where the world, I mean, for those people, and I think those who tend to be responsive to the type of message that we're putting out there, especially, I mean, a lot of my articles, speaking for myself, a lot of the things that I write, the people who write back to me tend to be aware that there is a conspiracy, an agenda to destroy civilization as we know it and reset things under a new order of affairs that's very antithetical to anything moral or good. So there's a certain responsiveness to the acknowledgement of a bad conspiracy. But there is also a tendency to fall prey to this belief that ultimately the big villain in all of this is China or Russia. That it's like something out of McCarthyism, like the 1950s, where you have people who are trying to say, okay, well, everything about the West is thus great because the bad commies are really at it, controlling this global world government agenda to destroy us, just like they were in the 50s. So you almost have like a rehashing, a revival of McCarthy's ghost in the current era. And I mean, I have family members, the couple who are like really, really, they're evangelical. They are really rabid individualists who are aware that you know there is this attack on the culture and the nuclear family and all of these things, but they are of the view that, you know, if you're too poor to afford healthcare, that the government shouldn't ever supply that for you. Government has no role to play in anything that has to do with our lives. And it's like, well, here you are making bullets as part of your militia in your garage and stuff to prepare to like go to war with the government. Like, this is what you're doing. You're using electricity that comes from an electricity grid that was built by not private individual enterprise at any point. These were government initiatives that built the infrastructure that supports the electricity, the water management systems, all of these things. And you are saying that government has no role to play in anything. And so it results in his children being ultra polarized against him, now falling into the, you know, rainbow fascism, ultra left.
Wow.
As a consequence of just having this caricature of you know, a conservative parent, right? And I think that what you wrote in that article deals with that really well.
Yeah, let's be Christian. We're going to believe in this idea, this way, this almost lifestyle that's very focused on community, that was really born out of an era where people had to stick together, especially as the Christianity went through medieval Europe and then eventually got to the Protestant Revolution. Those kind of people bred this religion, but then we're going to also be rabid individualists. Where does Christianity and individualism line up? Especially when you get to the sort of honor your father and your mother, about the tradition about, you know, with them. It's in Islam, it's still here. In Eastern Orthodox, still here about how you should honor guests, mutual respect. And for century upon century also, Christianity was really the backbone of, you know, the system, the monarchy, that, you know, people have to sort of maintain their place in society, render unto Caesar what's Caesar's, and so on. They hate that render unto Caesar. Boy, have I heard some amazing Protestant backpedaling about that one, that somehow Christ saying that, you know, you should kind of play ball with the current physical world, but really prepare yourself spiritually for the better afterlife later. They have tried to spin that every way to make it that individualism was awesome, but they can't delete that out of the Bible. They've probably tried. So yeah, it's really, I think, very hypocritical to look at things that way. And that's not to say that also that Christianity is some sort of like stamp that Christianity means, well, we have to have communism or something. No, but it is definitely something where you are part of something greater. There is a community. Christianity and traditional religion, the Abrahamic religions, have no problem with hierarchy.
Correct.
Zero problem. They also have zero problem with men being men and women being women. Correct. And people having different functions.
And in ancient Israel, I mean, there was always a safety net. And, you know, every 7 years you had a Jubilee year where debts were canceled. You've had, in every harvest year, a tenth of the harvest was left for the poor, so the poor do not go hungry. You know, there was a system there. And I think the more I study what is happening in modern Westerndom, especially, you know, post-World War II, excuse me, what I find that is that this marketing jargon created by Hollywood, created by Madison Avenue, of this thing called the rugged individualism, all, like you guys said, it's created narcissism, right? It is perfect. I mean, if you want a society where you turn everybody into a raven sociopath narcissist, this is what you roll out. And this what allows the powers that be to go ahead and dump $12 trillion bombing countries like in Iraq and in Afghanistan with nothing to show for it. And you got 7-year-old girls in Alabama who got to sell lemonade to pay for her brain tumor surgery. That's where we are. Because rugged individualism. It's insanity. You can't build this, you know, I always tell people you can't build a community, a civilization on that.
Absolutely.
Well, or things should at least make sense. Let's go back to religion. So in a lot of ways, many sort of modern, often governmental bodies have sort of replaced religion. If you look back to the past, like what the heck was, I don't know, the church? Well, in some ways, it was almost like a psychologist to help people with their problems. That's what the priest would do. It was sort of a big charity organization because it was supposed to essentially kind of redistribute wealth. You know, you tithe, then the church uses it for itself, but also tries to give away stuff. Some sort of, I don't know, community organizer. It served many, many functions, which have all been basically replaced by the government, or in the case of the American medical system, who the hell knows? It was just sort of, the church really can't help you very much, and no one can. But the thing is, the problem is with that is it's sort of like, you know, at least in the past, if you felt extremely miserable about your life, you could talk to the priest. If you felt you screwed up, you could talk to the priest. If you were absolutely starving but were generally willing to work, you could kind of consult the church. In fact, in Russia, you can still do that. I have a friend who's a monk, and he has people who are sometimes kind of take his money, but they try to, you know, go and beg for him to give him a job so they can do something, so they can get enough money to go by. Oftentimes you get screwed, but that's part of being a monk. But anyway, so there was sort of a mechanism, and people understood maybe what to do. But the American medical system, how? You know, you have a heart attack. What do? There's just no answer. You know, I guess Obamacare was supposed to be part of an answer, but it only kind of is if you're poor enough, which ironically, my children are poor enough, but I'm not.
Right, exactly.
So on the territory of the United States, they can use Obamacare. I can't.
Well, the way the options work here, let's say you had a horrible accident at your job and you mangled your right arm, and this is the choice that you have. Well, we could, for $20,000, we could reattach your arm, or for $5,000, we can completely we can completely remove your arm from your body. So which is it? You know? Yeah. I mean, the fact that these are the choices that are given to you in supposedly the richest country in God's green earth is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I guess the counter argument would be to that is it's like, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, again, when you have this supposed federal budget of $4 trillion, you'd think that you could somehow make it work out, you know, but so it's kind of an issue of priorities. It's an issue of also, of course, corruption and so on, because I think sometimes the pioneers leave with arrows in their backs, and the American system sort of maybe grew up first and were able to sort of sink their claws into it and make sure that there'd be no alternative. Excuse me.
Well, there's definitely this sense of this corruption of a cult of consumerism. You know, when you listen to people like John F. Kennedy ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. He wasn't saying go and adopt communism. He wasn't saying that. He was simply saying that in order to have a democratic republic, it requires that every individual within that system take on an identity that has ingrained within it a sense of responsibility for the nation as a whole, past and future. And so there has to be a sense of willing to sacrifice for a greater good. for this to work. Otherwise, democracy doesn't mean anything. You're just going to be part of a selfish little myopic beast adapting to a herd, which, everybody who's looked at political science for the past 2,000 years knows that groupthink is a tool that's been used by oligarchs for a very long time to get people to detach themselves from their own sovereign soul, their own sense of conscience, and fall in alignment with some controlled, herd think, which is, easily manipulated by sophists or rhetoricians who really themselves are just husks or shells without any substance themselves. It's like an Obama versus a Martin Luther King, right? Like, you could say, yes, they both use rhetoric, but one actually has substance. When you listen to the form of what they're saying, they both use arts of persuasion of people, whereas one is actually saying something that's inducing you to take on more responsibility, to do something good for the world. The other one, it's literally just to induce an emotion to get you to have new standards of behavior. And looking at things like Obamacare, that's a great example of something which was a big windeg from the get-go. Like, people thought they were getting universal healthcare. No, it was a big bailout to private HMOs and the creation of new standards that basically started increasingly justifying that you could eliminate a human life based upon monetary constraints of quality adjustment life years or whatever, that give like a certain dollar value for different categories of people depending on their life and behavior. If you're fat, a year of your life is worth this much money in dollar terms versus a healthy 20-year-old who's worth maybe $80,000 per year of medical treatment, and you would be able to ration and triage care based on that basis. And people just fell for that stuff. If they actually knew it the way that I just said it, they would never have accepted that. They would have demanded, that maybe some of the $1 trillion going into wars would be going into actually giving legitimate universal health care, which could have easily been covered for a fraction of that cost.
Yeah, it's also a mechanism that keeps people poor, because like I was even mentioning in my own situation, if I weren't on that weird poverty line level of income, I probably would know that, how should I explain this? But basically, if I were to start making more money, but not a lot more money, let's just say 30% more money so that's not going to change my life. Doesn't mean I'm going to be able to go and have a luxury nose job and not even sweat it, right? I would have, then my kids would have zero medical care on the territory of the United States. Of course, I live here 90% of the time, but they take vacation and all that. So what does that actually mean? It means that if you want this Obamacare, if you want to actually be able to have health care, you better stay poor.
Yeah.
Because that middle ground between poverty and the wealth to be able to afford the American medical care system and really take advantage of it, that middle ground is real dangerous. And it's a lot easier to just stay poor.
Exactly. And this is what I've said for years. And people who've been following me for a long time know this. I've always said the middle class is a sucker, because the middle class is the only economic stratosphere that doesn't have a hustle. Like, the poor in America have a hustle. You go into Bronx, Brooklyn, New York, whatnot. Heck, you even go to some areas in Poughkeepsie, right? You got these guys who are like dirt poor, right? But they're living on government housing, but they know how to milk the system where they're getting about $60,000 to $75,000 in terms of benefits from federal handouts. This is why they're rocking the latest iPhone while you're scrimping and saving, trying to get the iPhone from 5 years ago, or they're wearing a pair of brand new $240 Air Jordans, and you are scrimping and saving, trying to buy $60 shoes for your kids. This is the difference. And of course, the wealthy, they have their corporate welfare programs and their loopholes and whatnot. But it's the middle class who's a sucker in this country, because he thinks if he plays by the rules, if he dots every I and crosses every T, that he plays by the rules, everything will work out well for him. No, it doesn't. So I remember like dealing with entrepreneurial clients of mine. They were coming up, and they first started making like over six figures, and they're like, "Hey man, the Obamacare is out. I'm making 150, 200 grand a year through my business. What do I do?" I said, "Listen, man, start writing off everything and tell the state that you're only making $27K a year." They're like, "Why?" Because this way you get what is it called? Medicare? Medicare, right? Where you have basically poor people's insurance. Because under Obamacare, on his income, if you were to report every single one of his income for his business, he would be paying, oh my God, like $7,000 a month for insurance for him and his wife and his two kids, and with a $15,000 deductible.
I thought it would be more like 700. How? What?
Yeah, like 7,000, man. Yeah, I mean, ridiculous. And that was in New York State. In New York State. So that's how brutal it was. I was like, listen, man, you better you better say you make a lot less. Start doing some offsets. Start, putting on your taxes that start having more write-offs. Start collecting your receipts and say, hey, this is your declared income. This is what you're making at the end of the year. Just so he doesn't have, he'll literally be in the poorhouse. He'll be literally running his business to pay for health insurance on top of a mortgage, on top of the obscene property taxes and all the other obscene taxes that are going on in New York. It's just ridiculous. And this is why I think this is what's happening in the West. You create these quote unquote rugged individuals. You create these people who are duped into living this rugged, I'm an individual lifestyle, and then it's divide and conquer. Where right now you see in the West, we're seeing a transition into what Matt and I always talk about, neo-feudalism.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I could definitely see that. I just also like to kind of get into why some of these middle class people seem like suckers. We have to, if we look in a greater scheme at the United States, and this is something I learned from being in Russia, so we can finally start tying Russia and all this, is that Americans really believe that due to the past of America's history, if you obey the rules and work hard, you get results, right? Because the whole world from problem situations immigrated to America. And to be honest, until maybe recently, you could generally say that America was definitely the better choice. Well, especially if you consider that there are people who fled religious oppression, war. Obviously, America would be the better choice, even a bad America like today. Okay, so it doesn't come from nowhere, the sucker mentality. And when you come to Russia and you see the difference, because people ask, what's the biggest difference? The biggest difference between Americans and Russians is Russians do not care about rules at all. Rules mean nothing. They are suggestions, as in rules being laws. And that's a huge difference, because really when you get to America and dealing with anything in America, especially white middle-class America, every little rule counts. If there is a teeny tiny sign that says don't step on the grass, no one will step on that grass. And the question is that good or bad? In this discussion, you guys seem to see that as bad. I personally really don't like that. If you go to Russia and there's a sign that says don't step on the grass, someone's already stepped on the sign. No one cares. But on the other hand, one thing that's good about America is because people believe in working hard means success. Everyone follows the rules. Generally, things in America tend to sort of work better, like bureaucracies and systems, whereas in Russia, whatever. So it definitely has its pluses and minuses, but I would tell you one thing. Always be careful in dealing with business with Russian immigrants, because they bring that mentality from here. Because there's an old joke in Russian that, the Communist Party lied to us about communism, but they told us the God's honest truth about capitalism. You see what I mean? And they come to America with that mentality. In a lot of ways, I think that's one of the reasons why Russians can be very successful in America, because they come there very pessimistic, zero respect for law, ready to do business. So
that's the typical trader on the trading floor in Wall Street, right there.
Wendell says he steps some Russian blood. I like that.
Tim, what made you move into Russia?
Well, this is another one of those things which is
besides the weather.
Besides the weather, actually, the weather, as you get older, I like it a little bit less. But I don't deal well with the heat, to be honest. As you can see, I'm in an apartment right now. And I am just soaked with sweat. There's nothing hot in here, right? So I sweat all the time. I don't deal well with warmth, so that helps. But I'm from Cleveland. Probably most of you guys have heard negative things about Cleveland. Generally, that's true. But the big problem is that I grew up in a majority black neighborhood, right? So although you don't hear it, I don't sound like I'm some sort of rap star. My upbringing was by black people and with black people, right? That's not so much of a problem. The problem is, as you guys saw with Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, when there's someone you need to blame, guess who's getting blamed? And dealing with that through my entire, especially teenage years, it just got old. It just gets old always being, cracker or whitey or whatever, sort of being the enemy. I'm sure anyone who's a ethnic minority in some situation, let's try to pick a situation. A Serb in the new Kosovo Republic, well, that's a big debate in Russia. Russians in Ukraine as it is now, Russians in the Baltics, anyone who's a sort of ethnic minority in a hostile area has probably had the same sort of situations happen. Now, the other problem is that when you get to this, we were just talking about the mentality of the middle class white American, of this wow, we should always be happy all the time. And we need to talk really, really high and really feminine with our voice and have a nice white picket fence. And if some bad person comes by, we've got to roll up the window in our car. And like when you're raised by black people, that is utterly repulsive. Like that, white picket fences, I don't know what you want to call it, Becky and Clark, or would probably be Becky and Peyton now, is like that couple,
Kevin and Karen.
Karen now. Absolutely repulsive to me. And that's the problem. So I kind of got stuck between, okay, this is the world I'm from. The world I'm from is African American. I am not allowed to be part of that world. It's just, you're just not, okay? But the white America sort of middle class thing, but also because not only do I not really particularly like it, but because I was from outside it, I never really fit into it. I had some girlfriends from like other high schools, and it was always just like, you go to these sort of like house parties with with your girlfriend's friends from these other schools that were full of white people. It's just like, what the hell? Are you allowed to swear here?
Yeah, absolutely, bro.
Okay. So literally it's just like, what the fuck is up with this? What is this bickering, this back talk? What is going on? Just stuff that, because you're in your African American urban Overton window. Yeah, and when you go outside that window, your just mind is blown.
There's no gossipy.
One thing is,
there's no gossipy bickering and back talk, in the hood. It's survival of the fittest, man.
Certainly not with men. Probably with the women, but that was more. But with the guys, no. Where I was from, you acted like a man. Yep. It didn't matter what your race. If you're a Hindu immigrant, you're a man. All right, it doesn't matter. I knew there was one kid. His name was Raj Beer, and he thought that was so cool that he had beer in his name. So he'd be like with his accent, like rap flowing, like the beer, the drinking man. I don't know. I can't do it in funny accent. Not feeling too good. But anyways, everyone in Cleveland eventually sort of had to man up, as it were. But anyways, my ancestry is 100% Slavic. My last name is fake because my great grandfather illegally immigrated. So my Anglo-Saxon.
The truth finally comes out.
Yeah, my Anglo-Saxon last name is fake, but obviously I'm fourth generation, so I was born in America, so it's not a problem. But so all my ancestors came from Eastern Europe, so I decided to go back. When I was 16, I saved up money to go visit some relatives in Poland, and it changed. That really changed everything. So have you heard of Cuss with Guns? Guns and cussing go well together, my friend. But so that sort of adventure when I was 16 going to Poland, you were there. I went in the middle of winter for whatever, God knows why reason. I think it worked out schedule-wise, Christmas break. But like, dude, there's adventure. You just do whatever the hell you want. And you could drink alcohol at 16, which was kind of fun. And, like, because there's no police, like my one cousin was just like, here, man, just drive my car. I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know how to drive a stick shift. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. So driving through the snow on his car and going to like these little like dinky, dingy 90s, like 1990s Eastern European nightclubs. And the other big thing is that although I was able to have girlfriends, wasn't a complete incel loser, although I was close. In Poland, all of a sudden, even though, the women didn't really know who I was, the reaction was a lot more positive. I'll put it that way. So, that really set the tone. And then later, when I got to the end of my stint at university, I was kind of found out about the U.S. Peace Corps. And so I did Peace Corps in Kazakhstan. And that really sealed the deal. Because, again, going to Kazakhstan and the level of freedom, the freedom that I want, because everyone's idea of freedom is different. Okay, we have different concepts of it. My concept of freedom is out here. And when I served in Kazakhstan, Poland opened the door, and then Kazakhstan just sort of nailed the door open forever. It's time to walk through. So,
did you just jump right into geopolitical analysis? How did you become a public figure as a talk show radio host and other things? What sort of transition was that like?
Oh, you want to? The problem is the truth is it's a little emotional. Are we ready to get into the manosphere emotions? Okay.
Yes, let's do it.
I had a girlfriend who I loved desperately, which I shouldn't have. I've had a couple times in my life, girls sort of would be like, they were all from America. The ones who they said, like, you're good looking. I'm really, really tall. I'm like 6'1", so that's probably what they meant. So you're tall, and I have this window of time available. Let's bang for this amount of time. And this was one of the girls I sort of had when I served there, and I really, really fell in love with her like a moron, because she even kind of made it clear. She's like, dude, when this is over, you're out. You're you have one purpose. I should have accepted that, but for some reason I didn't. I was really kind of fell in love with her way too hard. But that's when you're young, and that's when you're blue pilled, and that's when you're raised on Disney and all that stuff. So anyways, near the end of the relationship, I kind of mentioned her, like, she's like, well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? It's like, well, I really wanted to kind of work in ideas somehow. I really get excited by this, like making political change and all this stuff. She was like, what are you talking about? No one's ever going to listen to you. No one's ever going to listen to just some guy like you. You don't have any ideas. I forget. She kind of went into this whole thing to sort of dress me down. And you know what happens when someone dresses certain people down? Well, my response was like, okay, fuck you then.
That's it.
Hard. And so if you want to know the real impetus, it was, I've always had the desire to have some sort of meaning in life, to be able to be, and that meaning through some sort of ability to have influence, which I kind of have. So in some ways, to some extent, I actually accomplished my life goal. So yay, happy party. But, you know, I didn't quite know how I'd get there, but it kind of worked out. And it was sort of that moment that really motivated me to show her kind of what for. So, yeah, I'm an asshole. I work on revenge-based principles.
You know, in some ways, there's some parallels to my own personal experience in some ways. Because early on, while I was still blue-pilled, as you called it, I was dating a girl who really got into David Icke.
Oh boy,
really like deep, and I could just see this transition into a, you know, from a typical left critical anti-corporate sort of personality into, you know, we were into like Noam Chomsky maybe is like, you know, but then after just a few weeks with David Icke, it would just go, the rabbit hole got deeper and deeper, and I tried to follow along to sort of see, well, okay, if this is true, if 9/11 was an inside job, if there are these international conspiracies, prove it to me, demonstrate it to my reason that this could be true. Couldn't
Did she shapeshift into a lizard in front of you?
Well, that's the thing. That kind of undermines that kind of undermines the entire argument, right? Because there might have been like elements of persuasive facts being brought up, but then at the end of the day, there's all shape-shifting lizards out to suck your fear energy from another dimension that really want to create global warming, because lizards like warm, and that's why there's global warming, because they're trying to, like, you know, create a greenhouse effect.
So they're trying to create a terrarium.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I couldn't really go along with that. I couldn't accept that. And so she basically said, you know, you're just brainwashed. You're insane that you're still believing the Shadowlands and stuff. So after we broke up, I was still kind of in pain because I did love her, and I was like, well, is it really that she is that nuts? Because she seemed reasonable when we began dating. How could somebody have gone that full hog? And so I started on my own path, like now just trying to look up some actual documentaries on my own terms and reading material on my own terms about 9/11, about the Federal Reserve and other things. And I was like, holy shit, there's actually a lot of truth here. And so I began my own sort of pursuit, going through a personal crisis. And then maybe it wasn't so much motivated by the fuck you revenge thing, but still it had a little bit of that too. I was like, well, you know, I'm going to do it right. You were, you know, going into this conspiraphile world of truth seeking in a crazy way. I'm going to do it right, and I'm going to show you how it's actually done properly. And so that became sort of, at least at the starting point, an impetus. I won't say that drove me that long, but that was there at the start.
Well, judging also by one of the comments, one woman sort of wrote something like, yeah, it's all because of an American woman. It's not all, it's more that was a good jumping off point for me. So yeah, it's not all because of this one interaction with one person, but it's a little bit of a spark, you know? Well,
I think everybody needs sort of like that is sort of, you know, if you're born into a world, a very controlled environment, culturally, everything, how do you possibly break out of that conditioning? Usually I've noticed some sort of a trauma, a shock of some sort that just gets people into that other emotional space, that dissonance, where they could then work out, work out the cognitive dissonance and actually accept that a lot of the core assumptions that govern your identity and the world you lived in are completely wrong. But it doesn't usually happen easily.
And one thing I can say in my case is that I now work in sort of building up ideological concepts, like some of the things you've read on the Strategic Culture Foundation, which is super duper. But one difference between, I think a lot of people, and one thing that maybe some of your viewers might want to try to consider having this mentality is, growing up in America, there was liberalism. We have Republican liberalism, Democrat liberalism. We have two sides of the same coin. Right. Ultimately, growing up, I knew that there were things that didn't work about America that, I'll put this way, I had the assumption that I don't think we have this right. Like every idea, how to live, how to structure society. I kind of came at things like, we're probably wrong about at least some things. So I think that made maybe to also this transition into working in new and different ideas a little bit easier. But still, when you have a framework of liberalism, you're stuck with it because you have to have some ideological framework. Even the dumbest, most disinterested person has some kind of sort of framework in their head, or else they would be very hard for them to exist with zero answers to even some of the most basic questions about existence. But I think maybe that also, Matt, worked in your case. Perhaps you were a little bit more open-minded than the average person to hearing something new or different. Or do you disagree?
Well, I think that I went through a couple of years of depression because the entire implications of this idea that there is a long-term conspiracy to herd society unnaturally into a slaughterhouse was very difficult for me to cope with. And I took it very seriously. It wasn't something I could just sort of like read and then move on to another thing. I had to, it was very real for me. It was very visceral. So for a couple of years, and I think at a certain point, I went a little bit perhaps too much into it, where at a certain point I was sort of speaking to everybody I could meet and trying to persuade them.
We were all 20 once, man. We were all 20 once.
Yeah, but it wasn't going. And for me, what I was discovering is that under the two circumstances, either people thought that I was crazy, which was the majority of people after they would hear me speaking about various conspiratorial things I'd been investigating and trying to persuade them to believe the same thing as I. And some, usually it wouldn't work that well, but sometimes it would. And sometimes I would wield my facts, wield my argument well. And in those cases, I just sort of was a walking downer, like really bad energy. And it would just kind of leave people pretty depressed. So I was like, well, I came to a resolution that since I don't know what to do, I don't have a solution to any of this stuff, that the best thing I could do is shut the hell up and, let people just live in the happy illusion, since, that's better than being depressed and not having any idea what to do to put out the fire.
Yeah.
But I did say that if I did ever encounter anything that would provide a functional, reasonable solution that could diagnose the problem adequately, I would help it. And so it did happen that one day I was on a smoke break at work, and there was a political table with some members of the Schiller Institute who were talking about depopulation, and they were talking about things like bring back. Yeah, and I was like, I know about that. All right, let's talk. And so we they weren't promoting depopulation; they were warning that there was an agenda to depopulate. And I was like, well, why is that such? I understand that that's what's going on, but why is that such a bad thing? Because in my mind, I couldn't really refute that wasn't necessary, because I was like, well, there are a lot of people on the earth, and I didn't work it through, right? So I was finally given a rational idea of why having people on the earth, even more people than we currently have, could be a good thing, because every person is a mind which could solve problems, and there's a lot of problems to solve. So that could be a good thing if you just change the way you're thinking about political economy and culture and a lot of other things. But if you change those things, having people is good. We are a resource that creates resources. So that for me was it snapped a lot of things together in my mind. And I got a sense of why this oligarchy was actually absolutely wrong, was provably so, and why there was a better solution that was functional based upon what used to be done in the better times before we were born. And if you look at how people like Franklin Roosevelt or Lincoln or JFK were managing political economic policies, it was like nothing that we have under the consumer cult of liberalism that we live in today.
Yeah,
they were actually utilizing state credit, protectionism, large-scale projects and infrastructure that defined what the capitalist system was going to do. It wasn't just every man for himself. So that was also, that helped piece things together. So that became sort of my bridge into a more activist-oriented, self-empowered identity, I think, that I've been working on for the past 15 years or so. So, but yeah, it did happen through trauma. It was a lot of turbulence along the way to get there. Yeah.
Tim, what do you see right now in the geopolitical space that's happening in terms of relations between Russia, the United States, and where do you think things are going, especially with the One Belt, One Road initiative, the multipolar world, and your views on the decline of the West and where the West is heading in the next several years to come?
Well, the Belt and Road initiative is a good one to jump into because it's really a brief thing. Basically, since really the early Obama period, especially when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, there was already an obvious sort of shift towards trying to surround the South China Sea. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's not just for fun or let's invade China. No, because the real reason is that the true revolution behind China's industrial output, of course, it helps that they have the big population, that they build a ton of factories, they do a good job overall making cheap stuff. But the reason that it's cheap is because sea exports became the real super cheap way to export things. So basically, the real miracle of the Chinese export economy are these what are they called, like super cargo ships that can take insane amount of cargo for pennies, maybe even less, pennies on the kilogram to wherever you want in the world. That's the real revolution. And so the real threat to China was that, well, this is the backbone of your economy. How about we make sure that at any moment we can paralyze that backbone?
Yeah.
So that's where the whole Belt and Road Initiative was really born from, was Plan B. Obviously, it's more expensive to send things by train through Siberia or Iran than it is to do so by giant boat, but it still beats nothing. And so it's kind of Plan B. It also is a sort of shift in focus to, well, if the economic center of the map keeps going east, well, eventually the Chinese probably are figuring if it keeps going east every year, maybe regardless of what NATO warships do, we might need to actually just start sending things by train because we're not going to have to send it this far. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's sort of another part of it. We get into the whole geography side of that. If we want to talk about the latest, specifically geopolitical issue that's come up that didn't exist in previous years, but you're going to have to allow me to cough here.
Yeah, do you think?
That was gross. Now, the biggest one is this AUKUS thing, this deal where the
hold on, Tim. One thing about AUKUS, I don't know if you got the latest news. The UK did pull out. They're not part of AUKUS anymore. New Zealand has joined, and it's been renamed. It's no longer AUKUS. It is ANUS. I'm joking, but go ahead.
Wow.
Australia, New Zealand, US, ANUS.
I can't deny that something deep down inside of me really likes that. So I will neither confirm nor deny that I like that joke very much.
Go ahead, buddy.
I like Pepe Escobar's. He actually arranged it differently. And he says it should be you suck, eh?
You suck, eh? That's when the Canadians join.
Yeah.
But anyways, so what the Russian view of it is maybe a little bit over optimistic, but you want to talk to someone with this unique view on Russia, which you can get from my channel on YouTube, Tim Kirby Russia, 3 words separate, Tim Kirby Russia. You should subscribe. But the whole thing about this from the Russian perspective is that it's like, wait, so kind of the U.S. is trying to sort of get around using NATO, and it seems like maybe the U.S. is orienting towards some sort of Anglo-Saxon sea alliance rather than trying to force continental Europe again to do what it wants. F France, let's get them out of here. That's kind of a different political shift. And it's also, again, going back to the previous topic, it's again putting down even more stakes on choking out that South China Sea if need be. Yeah, because we can play COVID games all we want. Let's say there is an evil conspiracy to make things more expensive and have less products in America or the world, Okay,
Mhm.
let's jump into conspiracy land. If there is, that would be one way to do it. Would be to create some sort of BS reason that the South China Sea is now a hazard or war zone or something where you can't transport through there. So again, it's sort of doubling down on that process that began, I believe, please forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was Obama era while Hillary Clinton was still Secretary of State. I believe that's when that
I
started. I
think
could
you
be
really hit
wrong,
on something there.
could be wrong.
No,
So
I
it
think you
ties
really
into
hit on
that.
something.
Yeah, but Russians are optimistic about that because it means if continental Europe is sort of, just too much of dead weight for NATO, that could open a lot of really good opportunities for Russia. Not opportunities to conquer France, no, not like that, but opportunities to sort of renegotiate with Europe. Because you have to remember that Russia could, in theory, do a lot of business with Europe, but there's a certain big, powerful country that makes Europe have sanctions on Russia, even when local Europeans protest that day and night because they're the ones who are the big losers.
It's interesting, Tim. You don't know something? Here's some. You hit upon a point there that kind of made a light bulb go off in my head. If you remember, you guys, we're all Gen X, we're all in the pretty much same age category here. But you guys remember back in the '80s when during the Cold War, and we went to war with Russia on an economic level, where there was we're trying to hyperinflate the ruble. There were financial instruments that were launched to expressly do that during that time in the '80s via Tokyo Stock Exchange, and as well as the buildup, right? The whole arms race and all that. Now we took out the Russian, especially the petroleum industry, really tanked. But at the end of that entire process in '89, we damn near lost Texas, right? I mean, literally, we lost Texas' economy, especially in petrochemicals, was wrecked during that entire time. So the American oligarchs at that time were willing to sacrifice Texas in order to take out the Soviet Union. And now fast forward to today where the same oligarchs, well, most of them are dead. You got the B team playing right now and the retards that are in power right now, the current crop of oligarchs, they, like you mentioned, make the South China Sea so damn like a war zone that you cannot ship through there. Is it reason why we're, this morning, and then I'll pull it up here again so CJ could share the screen, the whole Taiwan airspace thing, right? And I talked about this morning, the Taiwan Air Defense Zone. And this is from, hold on, CJ, I'm going to share this screen real quick. This is from the Taiwan Ministry of Defense, okay? And there's like, oh, China just sailed 70 aircraft into our area, 69, 59 aircraft into our area.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the size of this.
Yeah.
This is considered their entire defense zone. It goes into China.
That's kind of part of the problem when they consider themselves the legitimate government of China. And that's exactly why. And that's why the key thing also to understanding about geopolitics in our time that your viewers need to understand that for China, there is Taiwan. For Russia, there is the Ukraine. And both of these regions serve as a perfect mechanism to constantly antagonize Moscow and Beijing.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of it.
100%. So my thing is this. I mean, these are all the Chinese flights right down here. This is their stupid air defense zone. Are they making especially with all the the freedom of provocation that's been happening, are they making the South China Sea that dangerous, that repulsive, that it becomes so cost prohibitive for an export country like China to be able to export their wares that they're willing to wreck, not this time Texas, but the entire American economy to do so? That's a terrifying thought.
Well, yeah, because literally the government of Taiwan could at any moment of their own volition, or maybe with a nice nudge, call out, oh, please, Australia, send those amazing new submarines to protect us. There's too many planes flying around us, kind of, sort of. Right. And things are going to get real rough in America real quick after that happens. We'll get real rough in China, too, to an extent. It'll really rely on, again, how effective this Belt and Road Initiative is. And let's just say the Belt and Road Initiative also relies a lot more on partnership with other countries. So it a little bit also relies on the goodness and moral character of certain Iranians and Russians. Yeah. So that's also kind of part of it.
Yeah, I think that this looking at things from the standpoint of this idea of the BRI, like the BRI is expressing something which goes back a long time in human history of nations working on a view of foreign policy based upon cooperation, interconnectivity, developing long-term projects together with your neighbors so that you could create conditions where you have abundance. You're not just eating away at an ever diminishing pie with ever increasingly small rates of diminishing returns for each of the parts, and then fighting over that the way geopoliticians always get us to fall into, these absurd wars, going back to the 30 Years' War. And before that, it was about little territorial gains over little mining interests or forests or whatever the case may be. If it's a physical thing in reality and it has some value economically, you can get people to fight over it. And that includes also, as an addition to ideological or religious fights too. So whatever the case, get people who have different interests to fight. And manage the system of chaos from above. When you look at things that way, it's so useful. And I was just thinking about how, I was reading a speech by Bashar al-Assad in 2009, where he was organizing this 5C strategy. You guys hear about the 5C strategy of
Yes.
of
New to me.
It's amazing. It was initiated in 2004. He had begun organizing all of the different partnering nations. I think he got something like,
and that's what put the target on his back.
Yeah, and I mean, he had something like 9 different countries sign on to memoranda of understanding to work on this thing that involved connecting through rail, roads, and other vital infrastructure corridors.
Gaddafi was a part of that as well.
Gaddafi was a part of that. Yep. That's right. And I think Mubarak was also, to a certain degree, also.
And we saw what happened those two.
Yeah. And the idea was the Caspian Sea, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, I'm forgetting one, I think the Black Sea, would all be connected by these development corridors, and Syria and as well Lebanon would become hubs of economic progress, which was very synergistic with what later became the Belt and Road Initiative, And this was moving fast. It wasn't just an idea. This was like pulling in investment capital. It was like being worked out by teams of engineers. And like you said, Gaddafi was moving ahead with the great man-made water system as well. The biggest water project, I think, in the last 100 years was being built with the help of people like, construction companies like SNC-Lavalin from Montreal, here where I am, to pull out water. All these untapped underground water reserves underneath the Sahara Desert were being brought up in an organized way to make the Sahara bloom as the first stage of a multi-phase program that was transformative. And it was also being funded by alternative financial mechanisms that were outside of the IMF and World Bank monopolies. So all of this was sort of a zone of development with this other paradigm that was completely outside of the type of rules-based order that were dominant for the past 40 years. And that had to be stopped. And the way that they did that was just chaos and make the entire Middle East and North African zone economically unviable. Make sure that nobody would be insane enough to invest in any type of 5, 10, 20-year project in that zone because it's so uncertain due to, civil war, terrorism, other things, and this is what we all, saw when that whole zone was turned back into the Stone Age. So the fact that they're just applying now the same sort of instability with, around China's perimeter again is it has precedence. But what do you think about the relationship? Do you think that because part of the idea of the Quad as well, which plays into this, the Pacific NATO, involves also India as a vital player on top of Japan and Australia and the US. But India is a part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is a Russia-China-led amazing thing that now has Iran on board. So Tim, do you think that that this can work? Do you think that this destabilization thing can work when you have so many parts of the machine now working together on cooperation?
I'm going to answer that question a little bit of a kind of skewed way. Because what you just mentioned, the SCO, I think in a lot of ways the SCO was actually created by that insanity, by the destabilization. Because it really, in a lot of ways, all of the big dogs' enemies, in one way or another, be they very diverse. We have, who does America generally hate? Well, you got Russia, you got China, you got Iran, you've got, to an extent, North Korea. Venezuela's more on the hate list. It wasn't always there. Cuba's an old one. They're a little bit too far away. But overall, if you look, especially at a map right now, if you go to Wikipedia and you look at the map of the member states and potential member states of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It is the Eurasian landmass.
Yes.
It is that like united Eurasian heartland landmass that, what's his name, Mackinder wrote about in the very first usage of the term geopolitics at the end of the 19th century. So in a bizarre way, some attempts by Washington to sort of disrupt that, to fight this geopolitical battle of sea versus land, they've actually created possibly the strongest, most united land group, organization, willful force that has ever existed. So it's maybe they should just try doing nothing.
They should. I mean, look what happened in Japan. Look what happened in Japan. They just elected Kishida as the new prime minister. That is to normalize relations with China. So the question becomes: will we get a treaty or a truce, an official truce and treaty between Japan and Russia? And we probably get a normalization relationship also with Japan and China. There's a huge thing there, especially with some of the statements that were coming forth from Kishida saying that he wants a normalized relationship with China. So that's a big kick in the nuts to the Quad, because we know the Indians are going to play neutral. They got some really good diplomats that do some really good statecraft, and they're in the Quad thing, but they're also at the SCO meetings. They're they have issues, but they're going to keep that neutral thing and try to keep it going that way. Especially the whole Chabahar port that they got going on with the Persians. Yeah. And now you have the Japanese that are like, okay, this I don't think swallowing the suicide pact along with AUKUS and ANUS is the route to go.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, Japan's kind of stuck where they may be out east, but they're a sea power.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways, that's why Japan is that weird outlier. Like you have the great age of sail empires of Western Europe, and then later on Japan kind of joins in that little group there, and I think that's why, because they're stuck on those islands. It's all about the land versus sea, man. That's one of those things where when you first hear it, it sounds insane, but then when you start looking at history, you're like, yeah,
that's exactly.
Yeah, living as a land or sea society really does affect a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Matt, what's on your radar?
Well, there's there's a lot of potential for good and for bad going in to the coming week. There's so many things we didn't talk about, and maybe that's okay, because the world is a very fluid place right now. I would just add one thing. I was just reading how one of the top performers at the recent Taiwanese elections was actually a party. I think they got something like 30 or 33% of the popular vote was a party led by a guy whose entire platform was led by reintegration with China. So it wasn't, a lot of people think of Taiwan as being just sort of this one-dimensional thing, and there actually is a huge resistance movement amongst the population that recognizes how they're being played geopolitically, and they recognize that the future does exist with this other China-Russia-led multipolar greater Eurasian partnership orientation, which actually has a future. And same thing for Japan too. There's a lot of people there who recognize how Japan has been, a lot of the fascist traditions of Japan, just like in Ukraine, has been artificially inflamed over the decades, and they don't like that. They're not happy with the fact that they're also being used to replay this old formula in a new potential third world nuclear war. So you do have a lot of people who are organizing to, again, work in harmony with China. So I think that the force of just the times itself, we have almost 8 billion people on the earth. We have nuclear technology, which we've never had in human civilization's history, that gives us a power for the first time to completely wipe out civilization. But at the same time, that power, we have this great power within the harnessing of the atom to do great good as well. Like we could easily, if we so chose, feed humanity. We could end hunger within a lifetime, or even a couple of decades. You could, if you really pushed a crash program with a full intention and backing of a community of nation states, you could really do miracles in a great way. So there's these two different futures pulling on us. I have faith as an optimist that overall human beings were created in the image of a good and loving creator in a universe which is good and loving, and not just this cold, dead, mechanistic, nihilistic universe of just rules that have no reason, which some seem to really believe in religiously. But based on that faith, I have to see that even though there's a lot of corruption and very, very uninspiring leadership in the West, that there's a higher, how does Martin Luther King put it, that the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice, that ultimately this will win out in the end. But, you know, it's really an article of, it has to be, it comes down to a question of belief and faith at the end of the day, you know.
Last question to both of you guys.
Yeah.
And I would love to have you guys back on. This has been so much freaking fun.
Anytime.
Tim, and first, Tim, I'll start with you, and then Matt as well. What do you see is going to play out? Because right now the hot button here is we're seeing the empire dying a death of a million cuts. Okay. What do you think is going to play out here in the United States in the next few years? You know, I talked to most Americans. Some people think they're going to vote themselves out of this nonsense that they're in. I don't see it. I think there's a potential of America descending into some sort of a very extreme tyranny, or it could literally break apart in some sort of a secession of states, or even there's a potential, albeit small one, but there is a potential of civil war. So there's a lot of things that are happening, none of which is going to work out well. I see the trajectory at this point being very terminal for the patient. I just want to know what you guys think and what you guys see, especially Tim. You're over there in Russia, Matt being in Canada. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Well, first off, when we get into the discussion of secessionism, we have to remember that if you want to talk about where the average person is naive, that's a discussion on secessionism. Recently, I did an interview on my channel there, Tim Kirby Russia on YouTube, with Marinelli. He was the candidate for governor of California who wants to break California away from the rest of the United States. Totally disagree with the guy in every possible issue. However, it was kind of nice to talk to him. So very interesting. But the thing is with this secession, until Washington is that weak that it can happen, it's not going to happen. Right. Because I think people have again, this goes back to this sort of American naive way of thinking, this white middle class guy way of thinking that, well, if we formally ask to secede, then they'll do it because that's the way the law is, even though it's not really in the law. Try finding the mechanisms by which a state can secede somewhere in the U.S. law. Try finding that first off. But secondly, people really believe that if you gather enough signatures, that it's going to happen. No, it's not. No, it's not. Yeah. So what the secessionist sort of breakup of America, what would really what would that signal if that were to happen? It would signal that the deep state's done. They have no means to contain rogue governors or foreign influence, be it Russian, Chinese, be it homegrown, be it certain billionaires in America have had enough. Because remember, although we may tend to focus on the very ultra rich who have these bizarre Trotskyite, anti-humanist fantasies about what the future should look like. There's plenty of people with money who don't think that way. Right. Now that was more about my spiel about secessionism because I think it's a very naively approached topic in English language discourse. Moving on from that, what do I think is going to happen? I'm not sure, but we are definitely on a tyranny trajectory. Remember what happened to Trump. Remember the shutdown of Washington, D.C. during the elections. We have a man who was the 45th president of the United States, who still kind of always writes that he still is the president. So we've kind of gotten to this weird thing. Like, remember, wasn't there like what city was that? Avignon in France, and there was like the Pope in Rome, and then the other Pope. Yeah. We've gotten to that point, guys. We've gotten to that point where we have Pope and anti-Pope of America here. And we saw the crackdown. We saw what happened in the last election. Yeah, the voting is already not much of an option. The fraud was brutally obvious. So we already sort of have entered into a I don't really like the word tyranny because I always think the government has to be repressive. That's part of the nature of government. Let's just put it this way. We're in a heavy-handed, overly heavy-handed period. We have entered into there pretty headlong, and I think that trajectory is going to continue until something changes, be it probably something economic on a very serious level. But the trajectory is unpleasant for the average American.
Very well said. Matt.
Yeah, I find it. I listened to things like Steve Bannon's calls for shock troops to be to take over and deconstruct the state, and I get some chills because
Terrifying.
yeah, it's not a good thing. And I mean, I think Trump understood what, on a certain degree, in 2007, what Steve Bannon was as a Goldman Sachs counter gang operation within his own government when he fired his ass, rightfully so. Because if you look at like what the Bannonites are as this weird repackaging of a lot of the old school neoconservative dogmas, pushed by people like Samuel P. Huntington in the Clash of Civilizations, which, I mean, a lot of the Trump supporters, they rejected that. They got disgusted by that whole neocon takeover of the Republican, the right. And so that's why they voted for Trump to begin with. But then the axiomatics of the idea of a clash of civilizations, the idea that there was this intrinsic destiny by the United States as the manifest destiny nation to go to war with Islam and China, that were the intrinsic, like, spiritual enemies. This is what Bannon sort of was designed to recapture while still talking about international bankers conspiracies.
Meanwhile, international bankers. He's with he's partnered with a convict, an escaped convict named Miles Gow.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's wanted on several fraud charges. Who's an international criminal at this point, whom the U.S. government protects. Okay, it's insanity, and you got the Falun Gong alongside with them.
Yes, yeah, Epoch Times, all of that. It's all part of the same operation. So there's a lot of influence, and I think that this has done a lot of damage to the more truth-seeking impulses within the U.S. that wants to save their nation, which is, I mean, it's on the precipice right now. But a lot of the better Americans who want to save their nation, so many have gotten contaminated by this operation, and are just totally confused about their history, about the nature of the strategic global great game. Who are the players? And so when I hear Steve Bannon talking about, shock troops to deconstruct the state, that obviously is provocative and is designed to create these polarizations where, liberals who are already moving towards a rainbow fascism sort of, great reset orientation, they're just more impelled to say, okay, let's support these anti-domestic terror bills. Let's crack down on these white supremacists, and let's give all of the support we possibly can to the state's ability to just shut down, to basically declare war on the American people who are conspiraphile. And that becomes now a sign that you're talking to a domestic terrorist. Do you believe in conspiracy theories? Do you doubt that the elections were legitimately won by Biden? Oh, that you don't? You do doubt that? Well, that makes you probably a domestic terrorist. So you've got this terrible recipe. And I think for me, when I look at why the U.S. is in this position, I just wrote a 2-part article, which is going to be going up on Strategic Culture this week, on the how capitalism became a time bomb.
Yeah,
and I get at the point. If you listen to Antonio Guterres, from the head of the United Nations, or Klaus Schwab, they basically merged the UN with the World Economic Forum. They had a merger in the year 2000, and that was a few weeks before they announced the Great Reset in June 2020. I said 2000, but I meant 2020. Both of them have been saying that capitalism is immoral. It doesn't place proper values where they should be placed. It forces people to worship money, and that's why we're in this crisis, and that's why we need to reset the system and introduce a new system of comprehensive new values. And it's like, there's an element of truth in that. Like, we have been worshiping money and not valuing the sacredness of human life for decades. That's true, and that really was unleashed in the early 70s when, a big paradigm shift was unleashed when we took the dollar off of the fixed exchange rate system and the gold reserve, and it became just tied to the random fluctuations of the global markets. Tim, yeah, go for it.
I'd just like to jump in and say that the value system that they're offering is different, yet equally so, if not more repulsive morally.
Amen to that.
That's the important fact. Yeah,
that's the thing. No, absolutely. That's valuable because, they are saying that we need something that's not money, but then what is it? What is their value system? And for that, you could just look at some things like the green what is it called? The Carbon Disclosure Project and the Green Central Bankers Climate Compacts that are run by Mark Carney, which are all about saying, okay, we need to greenify the world economy to decarbonize nations of the world. And we have to thus create this new system where monetary financial incentives and values are placed on the rates at which we can take activities that shut down the carbon footprints. That's just another way of saying shut down the means of supporting life. They won't say it the way I just said it, though, because people would find it repulsive and satanic. But to say, oh, to save the environment and to decarbonize, because all of a sudden carbon dioxide is a pollution and thus an evil. I don't know when the fuck that happened, but that's all of a sudden the big demon we have to shut down and put financial values on these things through, carbon swaps and cap and trades and all sorts of financial activities like that. And also putting unpayable premiums on the insurance for companies that do dirty work. So for me, when I'm looking at the United States, the some of the only points of salvation I see are that there is some remnant of productive enterprise, including here in Canada too. Like I mentioned, SNC-Lavalin. There are still some remnants of capabilities to build things that could be of use for big projects, which currently they're not being built anywhere in the West that have any value for humanity. They're primarily in Eurasia and Africa increasingly, as China is investing in big things that could definitely employ a lot of companies and that could pull our interests into some greater alignment with that process. But politically, I don't see much good on the federal level inside of the United States currently to make it happen. It's really in the private sector that I see some impulses to not be sacrificed on the altar of Gaia. And on the state level, I do see some legitimate impulses to fight against some of the oncoming tyranny. But there's got to be more. Yeah.
One sort of hopeful note that you might enjoy is that within Russia, when it comes to issues of climate change, the future of energy and population, Russian scientists generally disagree, and everything looks pretty much everything's going to come up rainbows. So eventually, if the Russian sort of scientific view of what's going to happen in the next 100 or 200 years becomes mainstream, that'll be a real blow to this type of thinking, because in Russia there is no indicator that there'll be any energy crisis. Population's going okay. Everything's working out on Russian data. Oh, there you go.
Good.
Look, well, before I close out, Tim mentioned earlier that when he was 16, he saved enough money, went over to Poland, and experienced the nightclubs there. We actually have video clips from Tim when he was young. CJ, won't you play that for me? Good. There's Tim right there. In a club in Poland as a young child.
All right.
There he is. He is already cavorting with the ladies.
Yeah.
There he is. Not bothered.
The quality that is a very Eastern European look, kind of. So, wow, look at that sweater. That's I just also sent you a link there. If you could click on it, that link that I sent to the general chat. That's a game that has me. I'm in there in the fourth quarter, but if anyone's interested in American football, watching alternative league that's kind of hard to understand, you can watch one of our matches. You have to skip ahead because, gosh darn it, they don't really do a good job of editing these videos. But at some point, someone's going to be playing American football. So there you go. I'm the gold team, as you can see. So that's what the pros look like in Russia. A little bit of a downgrade, but yeah.
What position are you playing?
I'll be tight end. I come in the fourth quarter. So
nice.
Yeah, right. There we go. That was good. That was the other team. Good run. The Knights of Podolsk.
Okay, this is the fourth quarter. Here we are.
Yeah. Oh boy, are we on offense? 19. I think we're gonna think it was. Let's see, 65, 68. Well, is there an 82? Hold on. I think I see me. Hold on. I got there. I am. The bright green shoes to the left. Bright neon yellow green
82
shoes.
Right there. 82.
There we go. Let's see. Do I do anything? I don't think I do. I think I got one throw for the end zone, and I didn't do shit. I didn't. It was thrown behind me. So let's see. Is it a block? Where's it? Offsides. There we go. That was desperate. Hold on. We'll get to something. At least one play with me. Come on. All right. Going back to the huddle. I didn't remember that. That guy tried to do the buck the line. What was the Pittsburgh player? What was that guy's name? Palomalo. I think he would do that on occasion.
Oh yeah, Paul. Oh yeah.
Try to time it out perfectly. I think even
Troy Polamalu. Yep.
Are you one of the gray team or the blue team?
The to the left, the gold and black.
Right.
Number 82 on gold and black. I am off camera, so we are strong side right on this play. We have a goofy formation where the tight end is weak side. So all right, let's do it. We have a lot of motion. Oh, come on. You guys are killing me here. Come on. Let's do it. Snap the ball. There we go. Did I do anything?
In Russia, they count down from a 20 hut.
Yeah, that was a long count. But anyways, I wasn't really involved in that one too much. But anyways, yeah, it's fun. Maybe some people might enjoy watching the league. It's a little slow because you don't have the Fox News crew editing things. But yeah. So there'll be a lot more of me next season. Like I said, we're down to 4 tight ends, so I'm a lot more needed this year.
Awesome. And for those that missed the morning show, it's right there. Go to roguenews.com. China-Taiwan heats up. We break it all down over there. Guys, Tim, Matt, loved having you guys on. This was so much freaking fun. Tim, we got to do this again, bro.
Sure. My pleasure.
Dude, we got to get you on. And CJ, pull up Tim's channel so people can go there and subscribe right now.
Yeah, Strategic Culture. Yeah, definitely. This one, Tim Kirby, Russia, definitely subscribe. And the other one, if you want to watch some tourism videos. In fact, if you click on any one of those videos, like that, the Chuya Highway there, the second video to the left, Chuya, or this one, right? Ooh,
hey, man, I got some clients of mine that are, I got to talk to you about the whole Russia thing, because I have clients of mine that are interested in.
So, as you can see, like with the tourism thing, this is some pretty high quality stuff. The political videos I do are shot by me, so they are what they are. But the audio,
really good production value.
But that's what Siberia looks like. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I was looking at Krasnodar, man. It looks great over there too.
Yeah.
Krasnodar, the what is that? They call it the south of France for Russia, or the Florida of Russia.
Oh, where at?
Krasnodar.
Oh yeah. It's really, really warm down there.
I've been looking at something like that. I got clients, man. I'll talk to you about the whole Russia thing. I got clients that are looking to get the hell out of the U.S.
To be honest, I got a kind of big. Maybe next time let's talk about. I got a big project for immigrating people from the West to Russia that
we need to talk, my friend. We need to talk.
All right.
All right. With that being said, folks, we're over now. CJ, take it away.